Hello, my name is Alexia, and recently for a final project, I had to make an Unreal Engine scene of a bunch of characters dancing. For this project, I decided to use a PCG graph to basically create the scene that I had to for my project. So this video is going to be split up into two different sections. The first, I'm going to go over how I made the PCG graph, and then for anyone who already has access to my files, can skip to the second part, and I will put the time in the video right now. And you can see actually how to use the PCG graph and import your own characters. Right now I'm going to start with showing you how I actually built this thing. So right now I'm in a standard empty blank world, and I actually already have a folder called characters. When you open up your own blank world, there will not be a characters folder. It will just be the starter content. But characters has some characters I've already put in, and later I will show you how to add some more. So let's first just start creating some folders for organization purposes. And whenever I create my own folder, I always put an underscore in front of it because I think that's actually industry standard of organization. So first let's create a new folder. This is going to be called underscore blueprints. And then I'm going to create another folder, underscore PCG, and then I'm going to create one last folder, and this is going to be our data asset. Oops. Okay, now we have all of our folders, and before we actually start making any of our PCG stuff, you actually need to download the plugin. So if you go to settings over here and go to plugin, you can look for PCG, and you need the Procedural Content Generation Framework. I actually already have this installed because I used this world before, but you will need to press the check mark on the side and then restart the world. And this is very important because it will not work otherwise. So first, let's go into our PCG, and because we have the plugin downloaded, we can just type in PCG and do PCG Graphs. Also, if you're wondering how I got that tab with all the different options to make, you can right-click inside of the viewport here, and it will give you all the options of what you can make. But right now, we just need a PCG graph. So we're going to call this PCG underscore main. The reason why I add the PCG in front is another industry standard. We put whatever like the file is first and then what we call it. So this is a PCG graph, and that's why we named it that. But we can open it, and right now we'll just leave it blank. We'll come back to that. Then go back to contents and go to blueprint, right click again, do blueprint class. We're going to do an actor class, and we're going to call this BP for blueprint, and then we're going to call this dance floor, because this will be the dance floor that we'll create. So let's open that. If it opens up in a side window like this, you can just take the top and drag it to the tabs on the top there so everything is put together. So now we have our empty blueprint. So if we go here in the components and add, we can add spline. And the spline is basically a bunch of points that we will use to generate the PCG. Created a spline. This is going to outline where our PCG nodes will be, and we have 2 points right now, but we only want one, so we're going to go over here and delete this one. And then if you come to our main one and right click on it, there's a lot of options here. But if we go to spline generation panel, we can click which type of shape we want. For this one, I'm just going to do square, but you can do whatever one you want to make your PCG graph look however you want it to. And of course, you can also delete the spline and recreate a new one if you would like to. So right now, it's kind of small. So actually, let's make this 500. Let's do 1,000. We want this to be a very big dance floor. Okay, so now we have our dance, where our dance floor is going to be. But there's a problem. See, the spline isn't actually connected. So if we right click, we can do close loop, And now we only have 1 point on this edge, but we have this weird curve here, and that's because the type of spline is actually curved. So if we go to spline point type, see it's curved, we want this to be linear, and now we have our dance floor, or our spline, which will be made up of our dance floor. And we're not done yet. If you go back to components and add, you can do PCG and add a PCG graph, and on the detail side on here, we can see graph, and we can add our PCG main graph. And compile, save, and now we have our dance floor. And we can actually just add our dance floor right now. But you can see there's nothing there right now. Let's move this player character. That's because there's nothing in our PCG graph. So let's go back to our PCG graph, and we're gonna do spline sampler, and we're gonna do get spline data. So get spline data is gonna get the spline, well, it's gonna get the spline data from the blueprint that we just made, and this will be all the points in our spline. So we pass that in, and the spline sampler is just going to make different spline nodes inside of the outline that we just created. So if we go here on the side, it says dimensions, and we can decide if we want it to be on the spline. If we want nodes to generate on the spline, then we do on spline. But for this one, we want a dance floor, so we want it to be packed inside, so we're actually going to do on interior. And if you do on interior, you have to do unbounded. If you get this error, don't worry. I think it's an Unreal Engine bug, or at least the YouTube videos I saw that explain this said that. So now we have our spline sampler, and we're gonna do transform points, which will basically just give us our points, so we can mess around with our points. And if you click on the node and press D, you can debug it and see all of our points here. It's very densely packed right now, so let's fix that. If we go to spline sampler, and on the side in the settings, we have interior spline or sampling and interior border sampling. And basically, the interior sample spacing is going to be how much space is in between each point. So the bigger this number, the more space, the smaller, less space. So right now it's 100, maybe you want to do 200. We can check out what that did. See, now we have more space in between each one. And the border basically just gives how much space you want between each node and the border of it, and 100 will be fine for right now. So if we look at our dance floor, you can kind of see that they're all kind of in a grid. That's not really good for what we're going for. So let's use our transform points to kind of move them around. So we have offset min and max, rotation min and max, and scale and min and max. Offset min and max will just move each point however we want them, anywhere between the min and the max. The rotation will rotate each point between the min and the max, and the scale does the same thing but for scale. We don't want to touch the scale. Instead, let's touch the rotation. So rotation, this column is X, Y, and Z. So you want the characters to rotate around the Z axis so they can look in different directions while they dance. So let's make them go a full circle. Let's make the variation a full circle. So now the variation is going to be a rotation of either 0 or 360. So if we go back to the main one, we can see now they're all kind of moved around. Let's also change the offset min and max. So we don't want to change the Z because that'll make them either floating or in the ground. Let's instead change the X and Y. Let's make the max 20 for each of these. So now there's going to be an offset of 20 or 0 to 20 in the X and Y direction. So they kind of moved around. All right, so now we're going to actually stop messing with our blueprint for a second. Go back to our content. And also, in this content browser, if you don't have it, you can actually go in the content drawer down here, and this will give you the same thing. So we just added to our blueprint, we added to our PCG, let's add to our data set. So why do we need a data set asset? Basically, our data asset is going to be like an array of the different actors that we want. And we're going to have characters dancing, so we're going to add a bunch of different characters dancing to our data asset. The PCG graph can choose random ones that it wants. So first, we're going to need to make a structure. So if you type in structure, the structure is going to basically define our blueprint, or define what type of elements we want in our array. So we're going to call this S for structure, and we're going to call this dancers. And here we can add variables, and we already have one, so we're going to call this our actor. And then we're going to have this be a actor, but it's going to be a class reference, because in our characters, I've already created some characters, but we have a blueprint class of type actor. So that's why we're going to want to create a class reference of actor. And let's actually not call this actor, even though it will be. This will be our dancer. Then we'll create another variable, and this is going to be the weight. And this, instead of an actor, it's going to be an integer. And what our weight is going to be, as I said before, this is going to define the elements in an array. And an array is or data asset is going to be like a list of different actors or characters that we can use. And we want to make sure that our PCG graph grabs random characters to generate all over the dance floor. So the weight is going to be what percentage we want, or what weight we want that character to show up. For example, if we have a character with a weight of 2, it's going to show up more than a character with a weight of 1. Okay, now let's save this. So now if you open up the content drawer, we're going to right click and we're going to add another blueprint class. But this time it's not going to be any of these. Instead, we're going to make it a primary data asset. We're just going to set up our data asset. So now, because it's a primary data asset, we're going to call this PDA, and we're going to call underscore dancer template. So now we're going to call this PDA because it's a primary data asset. We're going to do dancer temp, or dancer template. So now we open this up and we're going to add, we don't actually have to put anything in here. We're just going to add what type of variable we want. So if you go to variable, we can add one. And this is going to be our dancers. And this is going to be our array of different characters that are dancing. So instead of Boolean, we're going to left click on this and we're going to make it our struct, which was dancers. And if we right click on this little blue line here, it's now an array. So we want to make this visible, compile, and save. And last, we're finally going to make our data asset. So find the data asset, and we'll need a class, and we luckily just made a PDA, which is going to be our class. It's going to be the setup or the blueprint of how our data asset is going to work. So we're going to do DA for data asset underscore dancers. Now that we have our data set open, we see these dancers, and this is going to be each element in the array, and it comes from this right here in our PDA, our dancers array. So we can actually add elements into this array now. So if we do add element, we can drop down, you see we have a dancer and we have a weight. So let's make this 1. And remember, I already have characters set up, so let's first add this Ada character. And this blueprint class is how the actor that we're going to use, so we're going to just add that there. And then we can add a new character, and we're going to also give this one a weight of 1. And I have another character, Dr. P, and we have our blueprint class, and we add that right there. Okay, perfect. So now, remember to save every now and then. Unreal is a little unstable. We have our data asset, and we have our PCG and our blueprint. But still, nothing is spawning because we don't actually have anything set up yet in our PCG main. So we're going to go into graph settings. On the side here, you see it says parameters under instance. We're going to add a new parameter. And this is going to be our data asset dancers. And we're going to right click on this arrow. We don't want it to be a float. Instead, we want it to be a data asset. Or actually not a data asset. It's going to be a PDA dancer temp. And now there's a little space that we can add it. And go to the content drawer, go to our data asset, and drag in our dancers. You can also just right click on this thing here. And if you did this correctly, there should only be one primary data asset available. So that'll be data asset. Okay, now that we have that set up, we can start adding to our graph. So if you press tab in this viewport, we can create a new node, and we're going to do a get DA dancers. Oh, we can get DA dancers, and DA dancers is just a get node of the variable parameter that we just added. And now we need a way to get elements of this DA dancers to match with the points in the spline sampler. So let's go back to our content drawer, go to PCG, and we're going to make another PCG graph. And we're going to call this PCG match. And this graph, if we open it up, is going to go through all of the different points in the sampler and match them to the data asset. So if we go to input, we can go on the side to pins, and this is going to be our what we input inside. So in is going to be our points, and we're going to change this to point, the allowed types, and we're going to make the pin status required just to be nice and fancy. And then we're going to add a new element, and we're going to call this one our data asset. So we know a data asset must go in there. For allowed point, allowed types, we're going to do attribute set, and then pin status required. The required is just so nothing breaks later on. So if we go to our output, we're only going to output points. So we're going to do out, normal, point, required. Okay, now we're going to do a match and set attributes. Oh, wait, we actually have to set that up first. We put in our in, and match and set attribute. Here, we can actually add a weight attribute, and in our data asset, remember we had the weight attribute. This is where you add it. Perfect, just like that. And then from our data asset, we're going to do get object from property from object path, and this is so we can get the actual correct attribute from the data asset, and this is going to be our dancers. But make sure, go to data asset, we have a dancer and we have weight, so it's going to be dancer, our property name. And then we plug that in, and then we do out. And now if we go back to our PCG main, we can open up our content drawer, PCG match, drag it in, make it a loop node so it loops through all the points, plug it in, and now, oh, see, I made a mistake. It's not dancer, it's actually dancers, because it's the name of the array, not the element. oh, it's not input, it's match weight attribute. It's actually match weight attribute, not input weight attribute. And now, if we save, we have no more errors. Okay, perfect. Now we want to actually spawn the actors by spawn actor node. We can plug this in, and we have to specify what we want, what attribute we want to spawn. So we do spawn attribute, and here is going to be the dancer because it's the actor that we just set up in our DA. So we put dancer here. Spelling is very important here, so make sure if you have any capitalization, that's all the same. So now if we go to our main, oh, we're still debugging, so we can actually click D to get rid of that little teal dot. We now have our characters. And if we simulate this, you can see our characters are dancing. And you see how the animation changes every couple of seconds? I will now show you how to do that. So, welcome if you just skipped to this part. I'm now going to show you how to actually use this script that I built. So, of course, save it because Unreal is dangerous. And go to characters, and we're going to add a new character. I'm going to add a lumberjack. This model was actually given to me by my teammate, Steven. So this model I did not make. Also, I made this plague doctor model, but this Ada model is actually made by AI. So that's how I got these characters, and this lumberjack character is now going to be from my teammate. So I have the lumberjack stuff. Okay, so here I have the information for my lumberjack. So we're gonna first need to import the T-pose of the lumberjack. So I rigged this up and mixed them out, and here's the T-pose for the lumberjack. We can keep all the same settings, import. So we have the skeleton mesh, the animation sequence, the physical asset, and the skeleton. We're going to need to use the skeleton. So now, these are all the dance waves of that character. And when you are getting these poses from Mixamo, make sure they all have the same skeleton. They will also all need to have the same skeletal mesh. So the same character mesh will have to be on all of them, and the same skeleton will have to be on all of them. And basically do that when you're opening it in Mixamo. Just download the T-pose when you first upload the character, and then all the dancing animations that you put on it. So if we do this like samba dancing, we drag it in, and then we go down, and you see you have to make sure that it's the correct skeleton. We have the Ada skeleton and the Dr. Plague skeleton for my two other characters, but we want this lumberjack skeleton. So we import that. And now we have that skeleton. And now we can actually do the other ones. You can actually drag in multiple at once. It'll have the same effect. You have to make sure that it's the correct skeleton. It's this lumberjack skeleton with the little guy. Import. Now we have all the correct dancing animations that we want. So now we have to make a animation blueprint. And this is basically how we're going to set up the animations to change. And we're going to want to grab the lumberjack skeleton again. And we're going to call this AB for animation blueprint. And then we'll do lumberjack. Okay, now we can click in it. And this is going to be the out pose. This is our little character. And on the side here, you can actually see in Asset Browser all the animations that we want. So if you drag one out, and you see this little character right here, if we drag it over to result, you can see now if we press compile, he's now doing that dance. But we want to use all of these dances. So instead of just having one dance, we're going to do a state machine. And we're going to call this locomotion. We're going to connect the animation post to the results. And our locomotion state machine is basically going to change the animation type between all of them with a set variable that we're going to set up. So if we do variable here, we can actually add a variable, and we're going to call this state change. We're going to make this a Boolean, make it visible. And so now our state change is how we're going to change which animation we want to have. So if we open up locomotion, we'll have the entry, which basically is just how you start it. And then let's drag out all of these dances. Oops. Don't double click on them, just single click and drag them out. And actually, I'm going to set them up. We're going to set them up so we can see how it's kind of going in a circle around each of them. Oops. And I think that's it. Yes. So now, if we drag out from entry the arrow, we go to excited dance. If we compile, he's doing the excited dance. We can drag out from excited dance to the hip hop dance, from the hip hop to the rumba, samba, and then all the way back. So you can see that we have four different animations. And right now it's not switching to any of them. As you see, it's 100% only active for this excited animation. But we want it to switch. If you see this little two arrow things, if we open it, this is how we switch the nodes. This is why we have our state change. So if we drag it out, we're going to do a get. And if this variable is equal to something, so if we drag this out, we do tab, equal, we want it to change. And what are we going to set this value? Not to 0, because we don't want it to be the same one. Instead, if we go back to locomotion, the way I'm going to set this up is if state change is set to 1, it's going to be hip hop dance. If it's set to 2, it's going to be rumba dance. If it's set to 3, samba dance. And if it's set to 4, excited animation. So, or not 4, if it's set to 0, excited animation. So it's a loop. So let's go back to let's go back to the change. Instead of this being equal to 0, we're going to make this actually 1. So if it's set to 1. And we can actually just copy paste this. If we copy it and we go into this one, we can set that up. And this is not going to be 1, this is going to be 2. We go to here. This is going to be 3. And last but not least, this is going to be 4. Or this is going to be 0 because we're going to loop back to the first one. Okay. And now we can compile, save. It's still only on the excited animation because our state change is set to 0. So how are we going to set it to 1, 2, 3, and change around? Also, if you hover over it, you can see what Boolean statement that you picked to make the change happen. So let's go back to our content drawer. Oops. Go back to Lumberjack, and we're going to create an actor. Or not an actor, we're going to create a blueprint. And this is going to be a blueprint of actor class, and this is what we're going to pass into the data asset. So our blueprint is going to be called BP _ lumber. In my past scripts, I actually call this A for animation, but BP is also correct. Actually, I'm going to make it the same as I did in my other files, which was A. Okay, so now we have our new blueprint. If we go to add in components, we can add skeleton mesh. And on the side in the details, we can add, if you go to the top, you see it says for animation mode. We're going to use an animation blueprint, and we just created one, our AB lumberjack. And now for our mesh, we need our skeleton mesh asset, and we can choose the lumberjack in the T-pose. So you can see now we have our lumberjack, and he is doing our animation. So if we go to event graph, we can get rid of these two because we just want the event begin play. And now we're going to set it up so it starts on one animation, and then after a couple seconds we'll have it go to the next one and the next one and the next one. So let's pull this out, and we're going to do a do n. I don't know what's going on. We're going to just press tab, do n. We're going to scroll down. Where is it? Sometimes it's hard to find nodes, but we want to make sure that we have our do n, because this will basically act like a for loop. Oh, I just saw it. Here, do n. So once we begin the world, we're going to go to do n, and then we're going to make n 20 times. So it loops 20 times. You can make this loop as many times as you want, but for right now, we're going to do 20. And then we're going to add a delay. So once it does do n, we're going to delay it by 3 seconds. You can also change however long you want the delay to be. But if you're using Mixamo animations, they don't go forever, they stop. So make sure it's as long as your shortest Mixamo animation. And then we're going to do a cast. We want to cast to the animation blueprint, not the actor. And now if we do set state change, if we go in under class, we have set state change. That makes so much more sense. And now this is going to be the target, the lumberjack. We want to pull out change. Oh, and when it finishes, we're going to go back to the front. So actually, to make it look nice, we're going to do that. And then control. Double click on it to make a node. Grab all of them in queue. So now we need to change the state change. And if you remember, the state change is set up where if it's 1, it goes to the first, it goes to, if it's 1, it goes to hip hop, 2 goes to Roomba, then Samba, and then back to 0. So we basically are going to do some modulo math to make sure that it's in that list of 4 numbers. Modulo is basically just finding the remainder. So if you do A divided by B, there will be a remainder, and modulo will give you that remainder. So we're going to go out, and we're going to do a modulo, which is the %, and this bottom one, it's basically just going to loop through a list. And we have 4 dances. So our list is going to be of length 4. And then we're going to pull out from the as AB lumberjack and get state change, which is the variable, so whatever it's already set to, we're gonna do plus, set this to 1, so we add 1 to it, and then modulo by 4. We can compile, save, and if we go back to our main tab, our lumberjack is still not there because we didn't add him to the DA dancer. So add a new one, go under here, you can look here, so we have our A lumberjack, make his weight 1, and if we go back to the main one, now we have our lumberjack, and if we play it, we can see now they're all dancing, and after 3 seconds the animation will change. One last thing before I finish this, if we want to change the weight, so say if we really like our lumberjack, we want him to show up way more than the other ones, so if we change this to 3, now you can see there's a way higher percentage. And if we didn't want our lumberjack shown at all, we can change this to 0 and he won't appear at all. So let's set this 1, and that is my solution to the dance for problem.